My parents demanded me to let my younger sister have my apartment because she deserves independence too, and now she's renting it out on Airbnb and telling guests, my sister gave up her life for me. Wait, she's Airbnb-ing my apartment? I asked, not fully processing what my friend just told me. She told the guests her sister gave up her whole life so she could chase her dreams, Brielle said, scrolling on her phone. That's you, right? I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I was in disbelief. This was supposed to be temporary. I let Alina live in my place because she was struggling. My parents made it seem like it would be a few weeks, months at most. Now it's a healing sanctuary on Airbnb, and my sister is making money off of a lie. I'm furious, hurt, and confused. I don't know how to bring it up without blowing everything up. But I'm starting to realize maybe everything was already on fire, I just hadn't noticed. I should have seen it coming. The pattern was always there, I just didn't want to believe it would happen again. That I'd be the responsible one, expected to hold everything together while Alina got to run free, experiment, flounder, and be celebrated for finding herself. I'm Rowena, 34, single, no kids, and I've been living in Portland for the last 11 years. I worked my ass off to buy my condo in the Belmont neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Hardwood floors that creaked slightly in winter, 2 bedrooms, one of which I converted into a small studio for painting, and a tiny balcony that caught just enough sun to keep my basil and mint alive. My younger sister, Alina, is 26. She's been a singer, a doula, a spiritual life coach, a tarot reader, and, most recently, a creative director for an LA-based wellness collective that lasted all of 8 months before imploding under unpaid taxes and infighting. She has a way of making chaos seem like mysticism. When she came back to Oregon last year, she was broke, jobless, and living between places, as my mom so gently put it. I wasn't thrilled, but I understood. Not everyone has it figured out. I just didn't know I'd be the one footing the emotional, and literal, bill. It started with a phone call from my mom. She just needs a little breathing room, Ro, she said. You had that when you were her age. No, I didn't. I was working 60 hours a week, living off toast and instant coffee, and scrubbing bathrooms in the mornings before class. But I didn't say that. My mom continued, she's trying to build something real this time. She just needs a space where she's not constantly in survival mode. Then came the kicker. Would you consider letting her stay in your apartment for a while? I had just signed a 6-month sublet agreement with my friend Brielle. She had a spare room, and I figured splitting rent would help me pay down the last chunk of my student loans. I was supposed to be saving for a small gallery space. My dream. But my mother's voice in that moment was thick with unspoken judgment. If I said no, it would be a declaration of war. I agreed, with conditions. Alina would stay for 3 months, tops. I'd keep paying the HOA fees, she'd just cover utilities. My place would be safe, and I'd return when the time was up. The first few weeks, she'd send texts, photos of crystals on my windowsill, blurry sunrise shots captioned, "Healing begins." Then it got quiet. By month 4, I was irritated. By month 5, I was suspicious. It was Brielle, ironically, who uncovered the truth. She came home from work one evening with an eyebrow raised. "Did you know your sister is on Airbnb?" I blinked. What? No. She flipped her phone to show me. There it was. My apartment. My tea kettle, my succulents, even my chipped yellow mug I bought in a thrift store in Tillamook. The description read, "Sanctuary Suite in Heart of Portland, curated by local artist, healer, and entrepreneur." The reviews were glowing. People praised the calming energy, the authentic story of sacrifice. One even wrote, "I love that her sister gave up everything to help her pursue her vision. You can feel the love in the space." I felt like I'd been sucker punched. I sat on it for 2 days. Then I went to the listing and booked a single night, under a fake name. Alina greeted me at the door in flowy pants, barefoot, wearing a headband made of recycled fabric scraps. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me, but she didn't say anything. She showed me around like I was a stranger. "This space has history," she said, as if reciting from a script. "My sister gave up her apartment so I could manifest my creative energy. She's been my biggest supporter." I didn't say a word. Not then. I left quietly. And then I called my parents. My mother didn't seem surprised. If anything, she sounded weary. "Alina's doing well for the first time in years," she said. "Can't you just let her have this?" "Have what?" I asked. "My apartment? My name? My sacrifice?" "She's not hurting anyone," my dad chimed in. "She's finally earning." "That's what you wanted, right?" They made me feel like I was being selfish. Like I should be proud. But all I felt was hollow. The next day, I went to the HOA. Turns out, short-term rentals are prohibited without permission. Several neighbors had already filed complaints about noisy guests and trash left in the hallway. They were relieved when I promised to step in. I sent Alina a formal notice. She had 30 days to vacate. That didn't go over well. "Why are you punishing me for succeeding?" she wrote in a long, rambling email. This was the first time I felt like I was doing something real. Something that mattered. "You're tearing it all down because of what? Property ownership?" She told our parents I was vindictive. Controlling. Cold. They believed her. Or maybe they just wanted to. I didn't reply to Alina's email right away. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew anything I said would be twisted into another example of how I was the villain in her story. The cold older sister. The rule follower. The one with no imagination. The problem was, I wasn't angry because she was succeeding. I was angry because she succeeded off of me, off of a lie. And worse, she made sure everyone saw her as the hero of that lie. The brave little sister who was gifted a life of possibility by her selfless, unseen sibling. I started remembering little things. Moments that seemed small at the time but had clearly been laying the groundwork for this pattern. Like when we were kids and she wanted to start a jewelry business out of paper clips and glitter glue. My dad bought her supplies, even though we could barely afford groceries. When I asked for art supplies, real ones, I was told to wait until my birthday. Or the time she dropped out of college after one semester and moved to Santa Cruz to experience life, and my parents said, "It's good that she's exploring what makes her happy." When I worked full-time through school and graduated with a mountain of debt, my parents didn't even attend the ceremony. "It's just a piece of paper," my dad had said. "You never liked attention anyway." I had built a life on responsibility. Alina had built one on expectation, the expectation that someone else would always catch her when she fell. I finally did respond to her email. I kept it short. "This isn't about success. It's about respect. You didn't ask, you didn't tell me, and you didn't even think to include me in the story you're selling strangers. That's not empowerment, that's exploitation." She didn't reply. The weeks leading up to the move-out deadline were tense. I started getting calls from numbers I didn't recognize, Airbnb guests asking about refund policies, someone from the building asking why a man was sleeping in his car outside my unit. I had to go in person twice to explain that I was the actual owner and my sister was being removed from the premises. Each time I walked through the door, the place looked more foreign. She'd draped scarves over the lamps, rearranged furniture, added a chalkboard wall where she wrote daily intentions for guests. She even renamed the apartment the Indigo Nest. By the time her move-out date arrived, she still hadn't made arrangements. I came over in the evening with a copy of the formal eviction notice from the HOA board and found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, saging the room. "You don't have to do this," she said without looking at me. "There's still time to fix this." I didn't answer. I watched her finish the ritual and pack the last of her things into a duffel bag. She left behind a few things, a broken lamp, a jar of dried lavender, and a half-used bottle of essential oil labeled Clarity. My parents called that night. "You didn't have to be cruel," my mother said. She was just finding her way. She found it inside my home, I replied. And she tried to make it hers without asking. Dad was more blunt. You've always had a stick up your ass about fairness, Ro. Not everything's black and white. Sometimes family means letting people be messy. I didn't say it then, but I realized later, they weren't asking me to be compassionate. They were asking me to stay in my role, the one they had always assigned me. The reliable one. The stable one. The one who didn't rock the boat. But this time, I did. After she moved out, I found my place in rough shape. Not trashed, but used. The bathroom sink was clogged with hair and what I think was glitter. The kitchen smelled faintly of curry, sandalwood, and mildew. There was a stack of handwritten thank you notes from guests, many addressed to Alina, thanking her for the inspiration, the cozy stay, the spiritual awakening they'd had in her home. One note in particular got to me. Dear Alina, your story about your sister giving up everything for you, it reminded me of my own. Thank you for showing me what love looks like. I sat with that one for a while. Reread it. Reread it again. Love. Was that what this was? Because it didn't feel like love. It felt like manipulation wrapped in incense and affirmation quotes. It felt like I was expected to applaud while my boundaries were lit on fire. Still, I didn't throw the note away. I kept it in a box with some other strange artifacts she'd left behind, an old Polaroid of her standing on the balcony in my robe, a stone she claimed had healing energy, a copy of a guest book page where she wrote, "My sister gifted me a life. I honor her through this space." There was no mention of how I actually felt. Or what I'd lost. Or the fact that I hadn't gifted her anything, I had been manipulated into silence, like always. And now I was finally choosing to speak. The hardest part wasn't kicking her out. It was what came after, the silence. Not the kind of silence where things calm down. No. It was the kind that hums under your skin, stretches into your mornings, poisons your appetite, and weighs down your body at night like a wet blanket. I'd wake up in my bed, disoriented, half expecting to hear someone padding around in the kitchen or a winching jangle from the hallway where she'd hung her energy-cleansing mobile. But it was just me now. And that was exactly what I'd wanted, and exactly what made it feel so strange. A few weeks after she left, I got an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper, torn at the top. In the middle, written in sharp black marker, it read, "You chose your space over your sister. Good luck decorating that." No signature. No context. But I didn't need one. It was her handwriting. I'd seen it scrawled on vision boards, gift tags, the bathroom mirror and dry erase affirmations. It was her. She had always been good at theatrics. And at framing things in extremes. To her, boundaries were betrayal. Control was cruelty. Consequences were oppression. And this note was her way of casting herself as the victim, again, and me as the villain in her story arc. For a while, I considered responding. Not to the note, but to the entire situation. Writing a long email, a letter, something to explain that I wasn't the monster she thought I was, or maybe that I was the monster she'd created by never allowing me space to breathe, to be anything other than her silent benefactor. But I didn't write anything. Instead, I poured myself into reclaiming my space. I removed every trace of her, not in anger, but as a kind of emotional exorcism. I repainted the chalkboard wall a soft sage green. I boxed up the crystals, the chakra posters, the dream catchers she'd hung in the guest room, now my art studio again. I cleaned, scrubbed, rearranged, and replaced. Still, some things wouldn't go. The warped floorboard she'd chipped moving in her massage chair. The lavender oil stain on the windowsill. The lingering smell of frankincense in the closet. Remnants. Ghosts. And then there was my family. My parents had gone from daily phone calls to cold distance. It wasn't a fight, exactly, more like a quiet disapproval that hung in the air like fog. I tried to be the one to reach out. I invited them to dinner. My mom said they were too tired. I offered to visit. My dad said they were laying low. But I wasn't surprised. Because for the first time in my life, I hadn't done what they wanted. I hadn't sacrificed for the family. I hadn't played my part. And when you stop playing the part everyone's used to, they don't thank you, they just get uncomfortable. Maybe even angry. At one point, I'd bumped into a cousin at a family baby shower, the first one I'd attended in months. "So, you and Alina still not talking?" she asked gently, pouring punch into a plastic cup. I shook my head. "Your parents are heartbroken," she added, like it was some revelation. "They feel like they're losing both daughters." I almost laughed. They weren't losing daughters. They were just losing control of the one who never asked for anything, never fought back, never said no. I spent the rest of the afternoon watching other people celebrate their growing families, their stories of closeness and support. I smiled when I had to, laughed politely, but felt hollow the whole time. That night, I went home and cried harder than I had in years. Not because of Alina. Not even because of my parents. But because I realized something I wasn't ready to say out loud yet, something that had been growing in the background of all of this for years. I didn't feel like part of the family. I felt like a feature of it. A support beam. Something solid and useful. Something you only notice when it starts to crack. I started therapy soon after that. It wasn't a dramatic decision. I didn't have a breakdown. I just looked up therapists near me, picked one with a sliding scale, and booked the appointment. I didn't even tell anyone. My therapist's name was Nadine, soft-spoken, early 50s, blunt in a kind way. The first session, I talked for almost the entire hour. She barely said a word, just nodded, occasionally scribbled something in her notebook. Near the end, she finally looked up and said, "Do you realize you speak about your needs like they're inconveniences?" That stuck with me. I went home and wrote it down. Read it over and over. My needs weren't inconveniences. They were just, never encouraged. Never given space. The more sessions I had, the more I realized that this wasn't just about the apartment. Or Alina. Or even my parents. It was about me slowly, painfully waking up to the fact that I'd been trained to believe that my value was in what I could provide, protect, and preserve, not in who I was. And when I stopped providing, everything else started to fall away. I kept going to therapy. I started setting boundaries, even if they were small, like not picking up calls from my mom when I was exhausted, or telling a friend I couldn't make it to her birthday dinner because I needed a quiet night in. It felt selfish at first. But then, it started feeling like something else. Something closer to freedom. Months passed. I didn't reach out to Alina, and she didn't reach out to me, though I occasionally heard things secondhand. She'd moved to Ashland, apparently. Renting a room above a bead shop. Rebranding herself yet again, this time as an eco-ritualist offering full moon ceremonies, herbal teas, and sound baths. She even started a podcast called Rooted Sisters, where she talked about family wounds and ancestral debt. A friend of mine sent me a clip once, Morbid Curiosity, where Alina spoke, in her soft, measured voice, about how some people just can't hold space for others, because they've never been given permission to hold it for themselves. It was vague, but I knew it was about me. It always was. Still, I didn't respond. I was busy building something. I kept painting. I sold a few small canvases online. Nothing major, but enough to make me believe maybe, just maybe, I could do this for real. I picked up more hours teaching workshops at the community center, and one afternoon, an elderly woman who'd taken 4 of my classes pulled me aside and said, "I wish someone had taught me to love myself through art when I was younger." You're changing people. That moment meant more to me than anything I'd heard from my family in years. Then one day, I stumbled on something that changed everything. I was researching artist grants, one of my therapist's gentle nudges, and ended up on a Portland cultural development site. They were offering community impact grants to creatives who had contributed to public storytelling and neighborhood engagement. Guess whose name was listed under recent applicants? Alina. She was applying for a $10,000 grant based on her Airbnb project. The proposal summary was public. It described how she had turned a space graciously gifted by a family member into a living artwork, a reclamation of female agency and shared space. There were even photos of my apartment, my balcony, my herbs, my studio. She'd rebranded it as an immersive art experience. Claimed she hosted guests who took part in journaling exercises, breathwork, and ancestral intention mapping. Most of that was a lie. She'd rented the place to tourists who left empty wine bottles and cigarette butts on the balcony. But the best part? Part of the grant review process included verifying property use and ownership. So, I submitted a statement. A very clear, very thorough statement. I attached HOA documentation, proof of ownership, a record of the eviction notice, screenshots of her Airbnb listing and her About Me blurb with her fabricated narrative. I even included statements from the HOA president about the short-term rental violations and the disturbances caused by her guests. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. Facts, when lined up properly, have a way of speaking for themselves. About a month later, I got a call from someone at the grant board. They just wanted to confirm that I was, in fact, the legal owner, and that Alina had no formal authorization to use the space for any creative or commercial purpose. Yes, I said. That's all correct. I never heard from Alina directly. But I know what happened. The grant was denied. Publicly. Not long after, she quietly deleted most of her online content tied to the project, including her podcast episodes and her Airbnb host profile. Her website now just has a landing page that says, "Coming soon." I don't know what she'll do next. She always lands somewhere, somehow. But this time, she'll have to build it without my name, my space, or my silence. And me? I finally opened my own little art studio. It's small, tucked between a bookstore and a florist, but it's mine. I host painting workshops, collage nights, and quiet drop-ins for people who just want to sit and make something without pressure. On the front window, there's a hand-painted sign that says, "This space is not borrowed. It is earned." Sometimes people ask me about it. And I just smile. I don't need to explain it anymore. My revenge wasn't rage or cruelty or public shaming. It was the quiet, deliberate act of telling the truth, and letting it do what truth always does. Set things right.